So how are homeopathic remedies developed? So we know with pharmaceutical medicines they do drug trials and so on. Like for example, a common homeopathic remedy is nat mur, which is sodium chloride, which is made from sea salt. So everyone at home has salt on their table. So what's the difference between salt that's on your table compared to the homeopathic remedy, sodium chloride or nat mur?
Right, so Western medicine, obviously, we always do our testing of new drugs,
Yep.
either on sick people or on animals, which really, if we think about it, it's not a good idea, because sick people, first of all, their reaction to a drug, how strong can this be, how much will it affect them? Animals, can they tell us how they feel? No, they can't. In other words, we look just at physical pathology. So even that part of Western medicine really should be revised. In other words, they should do just like what we do in homeopathy. When we are a healthy being, we should take this drug and see what it does to us.
So they test homeopathic medicines on healthy
test homeopathy. You see, homeopathy is tested on healthy people, so everybody can take a certain potency, and we can elicit, those symptoms that belong to this remedy. That's how Hahnemann started himself, in that particular person to a certain degree. Okay, so every homeopathic remedy was tested 5, 10, 30 people, so that you have a little bit of everything, child, female, male, and so on and so on, so that we get a complete picture of the remedy. And this was, and of course, any time we test this, though, the patient does not get any particular side effects from it, of this particular proving. On the contrary, it was like stimulating your resources, we call it vital force, we call it qi in Chinese medicine, which is a bit better word than the immune system in general, but it's really the strength of the person that we actually strengthen with doing a proving. So the person gets stronger, not weaker from it. So that's a very different procedure, because a healthy person with a good, we call it vital force, with a good reactivity, can probably tell us a lot more about the effects of that drug than the person who is sick, whose reactivity is already much more down. So they cannot throw up the symptoms that we want to look for, and the testing therefore is already kind of compromised, be it on sick people or on animals, in comparison to what we do in homeopathy.
So Dr. Luc, would it be correct to say that a homeopathic remedy stimulates a person's vital force or qi to come back into balance, which then heals the rest of them? Is that correct? Right,
that's correct. So, and the vital force, it's some name that is very hard to be accepted by Western medicine, because it doesn't have any pathology, it doesn't have any particular structure. We call it a spirit-like, being, so to speak, in our body. And like I said, the Chinese call it qi, they have different kinds of qis, defense qi, food qi, air qi. But it's the spirit-like force, that is existing, that really will move us along, that has to be in balance. We call that in Western medicine homeostasis, we have the name for it too. So obviously you're right, our remedies, they don't cure, they actually redirect the vital force, because it was injured, you can call it that way, or deviated, attacked by, it can be a climate, it can be an emotion, it can be a drug, it can be a toxic environmental substance. You clearly see, even what we say in homeopathy now was said even 5,000 years ago in traditional Chinese medicine, that it's the exterior and interior environment. For us in Western medicine, we're looking mainly at this point, usually, and it's understandable, at what we call the exterior environment. We always look at chemicals, what they call endocrine chemical substances, that would be available, that really attack our endocrine system and deviate it. That's how we look at it. So we really actually only look at the exterior environment, but the interior environment, that's of course emotions, is very neglected. And it's a little bit understandable, because what are we going to do in Western medicine? We can't really start giving these drugs that we mentioned, the antidepressive drugs, to any pregnant women, in order to avoid that we would have a child that is affected, for instance, with autism or something like this. So we put the accent on exterior environment, because it is something we can measure. Science in Western medicine is not science until you can measure it. And that of course is a problem, because with quantum physics, it's the law of probabilities, you know, it's not the law of measuring, that really would go against this.
All right, so if we take a hypothetical example, say we call this person Bill, and Bill has never had depression in his life, and his father passes away suddenly, and that's Bill's first experience of grief, and subsequent to that event happening, Bill starts to develop chronic depression. Is it correct to say that what has happened is that life trauma has knocked Bill's vital force or chi out of balance, which then manifests as what we see as disease or ailments, or in this case depression?
Yeah, so this is an excellent trigger, and coming back to your net view, the sea salt thing, it might well be that it's one of those remedies that indeed will be used, and it's to answer that question too. Obviously, it's the way we prepare you know, the remedies, you know, from sea salt from your kitchen. You know, we really, how do we prepare it? You know, there's a whole process, and therefore, through that process, the remedy, the sea salt, has different properties that obviously are not available in the sea salt in your kitchen, but it is the basis of it. But so when Bill has something like this, a trigger, and there is a grief, and obviously if he was very close to his father or anything like this, it creates a normal grief, I would say, a normal reaction in the person. The only question is how long and how deep will this depression last? Well, grief, I would say, not depression. It hasn't come a depression yet. It's a trigger. It's an event, obviously. Sure. And so the question is, how strong is the person's vital force to withstand this? You know, we should go through a normal grieving process. This is part of healing. Suppressing that healing process is just going against the cure. So this is pretty normal that he would go through it. He might be just having enough by talking to somebody and do some psychotherapy, even better and even quicker to work, so that it does not become a depression, so that the grief, the trigger, does not become a chronic disease which now will hinder him in his life and be present for quite some time. We can really have wonderful remedies to really give at that point, to help him, not to suppress symptoms, but to help him go through the process, to feel it. In other words, you know, we might have somebody dying that we loved, and we might just be stricken with grief, but as we process through the grief, we also might try to remember the good things we had with that person, the good times we had, and it becomes a positive process, because obviously everybody has to die, and it can be, certainly I think it's worse if a child dies, you know, it's out of order, so to speak. The child dies before the, you know, the parent. But here too, they will have wonderful remedies that will support the person to go through the grief without suppressing the symptoms. Just goes faster through the process and really process it in a very adequate way, you know, not suppressing it, feeling the grief, but also being able to really go through life and go further through life with the help of this remedy, because our vital force gets stronger. It takes the blow of the grief, but then we really help it to restore it to its strength.